meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. This is where we will go. Nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the Speed Meter Steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill, and so it's the late 18th century in England. A young man is growing up in Cornwall. Born to be in the tin mines, he's a big jock of a guy who absolutely sucks at school, except for sports, of course. He does well there. And oddly enough, he's not bad at math, although he likes it, but he won't do it the way he's taught to do it, so he ends up failing that as well. Now, had he been born, say, 200 years later, say, and maybe in the United States, he probably just would have gotten an athletic scholarship and wound up in the NFL. But this was late 18th century England. That wasn't going to be happening, and so he pretty much just got thrown out of school and sent to the mines. And normally that would be the end of the story, except that this young man was Richard Trevithick. Despite the fact that he looked like Jeremy Clarkson, Ricky Trevithick was actually a natural-born mechanical genius, a Mozart of metal. And he was there when a guy named William Murdoch, who was an assistant of James Watt, test ran a small model steam engine in Cornwall. Little Ricky ran off from there, played hooky, and started to tinker in his spare time. Trevithick reasoned that iron and steel manufacture had reached a point where boilers, pipes, and pistons could be made to use the much higher pressure that steam is capable of producing. Higher pressure would mean more torque, and thus more explosive energy needed to get things rolling. Trevithick was good at engineering, naturally good, and in fact became a mining engineer. But Captain Dick hadn't forgotten his idea, and around 1801, he set about to design and build the little beast. Keep in mind that prior to this, steam engines did not use the pressure of the steam to move pistons per se, but rather relied on the vacuum caused when the steam condenses. The term atmospheric engine was common at the time to describe this. And although engines using the positive pressure of steam had been designed and used for some decades, they were considered dangerous, as metallurgy just couldn't cope with the pressures involved. But crucible steel was fairly available in Captain Dick's time, and he set to forging. His design was simple: 4 wheels, a tiller, a big boiler, and his high-pressure steam engine pistons attached to the wheels locomotive style. It's nuts. And he calls up some friends and says, "Let's take her out for a spin!" And so, on Christmas Eve, 1801, Richard Trevithick embarked on the world's first joyride. One of his friends present wrote,
"When we'd seen that Captain Dick was a-going to turn on steam, we jumped up, as many as could, maybe 7 or 8 of us. 'Twas a stiffish hill, but she went off like a bird."
Now, it would have ended there, but instead it ended at a local pub. After trundling off for a mile or so, they stopped for the obligatory pint at a roadside establishment. There was one problem. No one thought of the fact that if you didn't douse the fire in the boiler and just left it unattended, eventually the water would boil off, the heat and pressure would exceed the ability of the steel to withstand, and the whole thing would explode. Now, I can't say as I blame them for not doing this for 2 reasons. I mean, one, first, no high-pressure engine on the planet at the time other than this one, and no one really knew that the fire had to be doused. And second, they were having a great time, partying it up on Christmas Eve, and really, it really didn't give it any mind until the thing blew up. After that, they all knew you had to douse the fire, so the problem wouldn't be repeated. Trevithick did, of course, build a replacement. But to be honest, his work on steam carriages didn't go much further. He did a public demonstration of the thing, and it really didn't spark much interest. He sold it to a local miller who converted it to run his mill. Trevithick instead invested the rest of his career pretty much to developing locomotives. His influence on the development of the locomotive cannot be underestimated, and much of it endures in some fashion to this day. And this high-pressure steam engine, which would be the basic power plant for road-going steam engines for the next 100 years. For most of the 19th century, steam carriages could be seen huffing and puffing along the roads of Europe. Indeed, steam carriage lines competed with rail lines for fares, and in some countries, lobbyists for one side or the other were able to litigate their competition out of existence. Steam engines were the rocket science of the era, and the power to move both people and cargo swiftly over land and sea with them was the stuff of both science fiction and science fact at the time. Not until the development of the internal combustion engine in the late 19th century was there anything to challenge the power and dominance of the engine that Richard Trevithick first blew up at that roadside pub. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History. See you next week. Peace.